On this edition of the Pigskin Cafe, we're going to be taking Alabama's bye week to assess where the team is at on offense and defense, and then look ahead to the matchup of the year versus the Georgia Bulldogs in Bryant-Denny Stadium. Now, pull up a seat and let's dive right in.
Welcome to the Pigskin Cafe, a podcast where Hampton, Chase, and Graham break down all things college football. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
They had to win this game.
There's a problem. This one's tough.
We are back.
That's what my gut's telling me.
I genuinely could not believe it.
You don't live in the great state of Texas.
All right, big boy. Hold my sweet tea.
What are we doing?
That is a stat there, ladies and gentlemen.
Welcome back into the Pigskin Cafe. My name is Hampton Shepard, but you don't see Chaser Graham Haney here tonight, but I do have the man, the myth, the legend, Big Papa Auborn Shepard, hopping back in the cafe, joining us again. Shep, how we doing tonight, man?
Man, we're doing good. We heard the cafe was open and we're ready to eat.
Ready to eat, ready to feast, baby, on some Alabama football. But before we dive into that, I just want to say off the top, thank you to everybody who has subscribed to us in the last week or so. We passed 100 subscribers, and now we sit at 120 at the time of this recording. So we're on the march to 200. If you like what we're doing here, and we appreciate the love and support that we've received over the past few weeks, go ahead, hit that subscribe button so you know anytime a video goes live. Hit that notification bell, leave us a like, and leave us a comment. We love hearing from you. It means the world to us. And let's move in to what the people want to hear. They want to hear about this Alabama football team that we watched play 3 games to this point. They played Western Kentucky, South Florida, and Wisconsin. So, Shep, I want to start with you. Before we look ahead to Georgia, I want to kind of get a pulse check of where is Alabama at this point in the season, their first break. Let's start on the defensive side of the ball. Probably the biggest shift in terms of philosophy and scheme from last year to this year, because what Kane Womack runs and what Nick Saban ran are drastically different in the approach in everything. You go from a two-gap scheme on the defensive line, a lot of man and pattern match zone from Nick Saban, to now you're playing a front that is much more aggressive, that leads to defensive linemen getting upfield, being disruptive, making plays in the backfield, and a lot more zone incorporated into that defense. So what is your assessment of that unit so far this year?
Man, so far, I'm going to be honest, this has probably been my biggest surprise. You think about Alabama and you think about the rich history, and it really has to do with really good defense. And you bring in a coach who has had decent defenses, but nowhere near the status of what Alabama has been in the past. And so for me, I think it's really interesting to see how quick they are, how they fly around. I feel like there's still been some things that are, I would say, more vanilla that have been shown right now. I think there's a lot more potential that we as fans don't know yet. I think that'll be revealed to us this week, this coming week playing Georgia. But I'm really impressed with how just stout the defense has been. I mean, against Wisconsin, there was a few runs that were broke off here or there, but really that was more so like somebody just missed being in the spot. I mean, they were there. The defense was there ready for the play, but maybe they hit the wrong gap. I've been really impressed by the defense. I've been really impressed by how they're trying to develop the depth of the defense. I feel like in years past, that's been something that hasn't really happened. I mean, you see oftentimes for Nick Saban, you would see a couple other DBs, but for the majority, it was those guys and those guys only, unless they were, really blowing somebody out. And I really feel like DeBoer and his staff have been able to show these young guys, hey, we're going to get you in the game and we're going to let you get some game experience, but it's also not in a way to hurt their confidence or hurt the team. And that's what's been really impressive to me, to see so many guys being cycled in and out who you see the potential there. And the more they get these reps, the more and more they will be confident, not only as coaches to play them, but also as players to know, hey, I've had a chance I can get in this game. Looking back to South Florida, the defense played really well. I mean, obviously the offense was kind of stymied for the most part of the game, but the defense played really well. Against Wisconsin, same thing. Really good defensive play. So that's been my biggest surprise on the defensive side. So many new faces in and out, and also Keon Sabb. I mean, that man is he's a beast. I mean, sorry, Caleb Downs, we're not really missing you because we got our guy. We got a guy too. But what would you say has been your takeaway of the defense so far this year?
So I agree with everything that you said, and I want to elaborate more on the point that you mentioned about the rotation of guys. That is something that we were not accustomed to under Nick Saban. Now, he would occasionally break that rule if he had a freshman phenom that he would kind of incorporate slowly into the game, slowly as the season progressed. But never have we rotated, or never has Alabama rotated 7 or 8 DBs in the first half. And that's what they did, I know, especially against South Florida and against Western Kentucky. And in this new era of the transfer portal, of NIL, it becomes increasingly more paramount for you to do so, to give those guys who are not going to have as big of a role as Alabama heads into the meat of their schedule an opportunity to play, an opportunity to gain confidence, gain experience, and know that, hey, this coaching staff is trying to develop me. They're trying to give me an opportunity to make a name for myself out on the field. And I know the coaches have even said that the players earn their time on the field in practice. If you have a good week of practice, the coaches are going to give you an opportunity to play in the game. Not saying that didn't happen under Nick Saban. It absolutely did. But I think it's even more so now with this coaching staff, and I think that's a really unique change. And overall, I think it's a good one because Alabama has a lot of talented young players in that secondary, other than a guy like Xavier Brown, who's starting for them, and Jalen Mbakwe, who's played a meaningful role so far, because you got guys like Red Morgan, you got guys like Zay Mipsey, Deshaun Jones, the transfer from Wake Forest, has gotten in there some as well. So I thought that was a great point by you and wanted to elaborate further. The other main takeaway that I have for this defense, I think they've done a much better job of taking the ball away and forcing turnovers. Now, I know against South Florida they didn't force any, but I think in the Western Kentucky game and in the game against Wisconsin, they had 3 or 4 apiece. I believe 3 in each, which is really impressive. And that, ranges from fumbles forced to interceptions. And those plays turn into points for the offense. They turn into short fields and really kind of gets momentum going for the team. And I think that's been really impressive. My one concern is the run defense a little bit. Right now, they rank 12th in the SEC in rushing yards allowed. So I think that's a little bit of a concern. I think part of it is because of the scheme to a degree. When you play when you play a scheme that is more disruptive, it can lead to potentially you rushing too far upfield or you getting in the wrong gap, and then a guy busts a run for 10 to 15 yards. And I think that happened a few times against South Florida and against Wisconsin, but it's a give and take, because then you also have times where plays are made in the backfield and they lose yards. And that is much more prevalent in this defense, where, as in a 2-gap scheme, the D lineman controls the offensive lineman, and their job is, like it says, to occupy the 2 gaps and keep the linebackers clean so that they can make the tackle. And so there is a little bit of a difference there, and it's an adjustment for Alabama fans because you're kind of used to that approach of being more of a stonewall defense where you're not giving up anything, but you might have less plays in the backfield. So I think that is something I'm looking to be improved. And then another point to kind of go off what you said, we said on the pod last week, me and Chase did, that we kind of felt like this defense had been very vanilla, and that they were holding some stuff back. Well, Kane Womack in his Monday presser last week, he confirmed that was the case, that there's a lot on defense that they haven't shown, which I'm excited to see what those wrinkles are, what exotic blitzes and coverages he has to deploy against Georgia and kind of spring on them and maybe catch them off guard, maybe force a turnover or two that could really swing the game. So that's kind of my thoughts on the defense. And I want to get one more question to you before we shift to the offense, Shep. And I don't necessarily think that I have one off the top of my head, and you may not either. But who's a player – actually, I do have a player now that I'm about to ask you the question. Who's a player on defense that you've been disappointed in so far? Doesn't mean they played bad, and it doesn't mean that they've just been downright awful, but a guy that you thought coming into the year was going to become a household name, was going to be a primary contributor on this defense, and hasn't shown that to this point. Who would that be for you?
Man, I'm going to be honest. I'm not as, I guess I would say, in tune with the kind of preseason who's the guys to look for. To be honest, I really haven't been disappointed with anybody particularly that I can put a finger on. One thing I have noticed that kind of is in line with this, though, is for me, I feel like we're seeing a defense that is probably one in years past that is much more, I feel like, athletic than we've ever seen. And I don't know if you would agree with that. To some extent, I feel like, you were mentioning, them breaking runs. And, I mean, you're seeing guys, they're really athletic. They may miss the gap, but you're seeing somebody come from 10 yards behind the running back after he's hit the line of scrimmage and they're getting 10 yards, So I can't put a finger on someone in particular. I've been really impressed with just the athletes that they have. I do think there's some youth in that, so there are some struggles. But who would you say is kind of your disappointment?
Before I get to that, on the athlete front, I do think this is one of the more athletic defenses Alabama has had in the past few years. I thought last year they were pretty athletic, so I think they're pretty comparable. But 2022 definitely was a step down in the caliber of player. There were a couple guys on that defense that were not bad players by any stretch of the imagination, but they probably wouldn't have been starting at Alabama, say, circa 2015, 16, 17. I think every Alabama fan would probably agree with that to an extent. And you also had a defensive coordinator that was doing a disservice to some of those guys, putting them in positions that they had no business being in. See DeMarco Hellams against Tennessee in 2022, who kept getting exposed and had to cover Jalen Hyatt in the slot over and over and over again and kept getting burnt like toast over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So I agree with you on that point. The one guy for me that came to mind, and I thought he was a bit of a disappointment last year, and part of it was due to injury. I fully give this player grace with that. But Jaheim Oatis, I think Jaheim Oatis has not made the type of impact that I was expecting, especially after what I thought he had a stellar freshman campaign. And I think maybe the difference, he lost a lot of weight from 2022 to 2023. And so that caused him to play more as an end instead of a D tackle, or D tackle, nose tackle position that he was playing in 2022. And I think he put on a little bit more weight for this upcoming year, but I feel like he didn't even hardly play against Wisconsin. So I don't know if it was injury or just guys outplaying him, because to me, when I watch the defensive line, a guy like Tim Keenan constantly flashes on the screen, disruptive, not only blowing up run plays, but he's really gotten much better as a pass rusher, using his hands to win inside. He's got surprising quickness for a big fella like him. But him, James Smith, I think Tim Smith's played really well too. Those three guys have kind of stood out to me more so than Jaheim Oatis. But Alabama has a lot of depth along the defensive line, because I'm not even mentioning guys like Damon Payne, who I think's played well, Jamarian Lathan, LT Overton. They're more of that bandit position, that kind of that end. So overall, that's a really deep unit, so it may be more difficult for him to stand out, but I'm looking to see a little bit more from him as we kind of keep going into the season and to the meat of the SEC schedule. So, Shep, any more thoughts on the defense before we kind of transition to the offense?
No, man, I'm good on defense. Excited for what they're showing and the potential that they're continuing to progress with.
Yeah, and me too. And I'll just say again, with the run defense, they're 12th in the SEC right now in rushing yards allowed. I think that's got to improve. But they're only allowing 8.6 points per game, which is elite of elite.
Yeah.
And in this day and age of college football, what matters is keeping folks out of the end zone, especially with how potent offenses are. Even though there is a lot of data to suggest some of the defensive schemes are catching up with these offenses and kind of limiting scoring, along with the new play clock rules that are implemented in college football starting last year. I do think keeping them out of the end zone and playing bend but don't break defense is more important than ever. You combine that with taking the ball away, and you're going to have a pretty good unit. And I think Alabama is on pace for that as we keep going into the year. So now, Shep, let's transition to the offense. It's been, I would say, 2 good games for the offense and 1 pretty average to poor performance. If we're counting the South Florida game, that's how I would rate the South Florida game. So overall, kind of like the defense, I want you to give me your overall assessment of the offense. What do you think of the scheme, the play calling to this point, and what do you think of the improvement that you've seen from quarterback Jalen Milroe from last year to this year?
Yeah, so I am probably one of the few who, well, not the few. I really think the offense, you kind of saw a cupcake game. Let's be real. Then you kind of saw a team that played them last year and was prepared, who I feel like has a good coach who's preparing them well.
Really? Can I just say,
yeah,
Golish for USF will be at a major program in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Mark my words. He's really impressive.
He has his team prepared. So I would say, I feel like a lot of Alabama struggles personally in that game. A little bit, I would say, obviously, Milroe struggled at times. I think some of that had to do with the way they schemed up their defense and the changing of looks. But I also think when your offensive line isn't very solidified, it really at that point in the season, really, I know it's game 2, but when you don't have that solid group in front of you that you really know, hey, these are the guys I truly trust, I think that messes with you a little bit. I think that kind of messed with the run game a little bit as well. But I will say I'm very excited for this offense. I think we've seen the flashes of excitement. I think we've seen the plays where you can take one drop back and score a touchdown, and that's what we need. We've needed again from Alabama football. We've needed to see a little more electricity. I would say in the wide receiver room, especially after last year. I think we've really been able to see that. I think that they have schemed Milroe up in such a way that he is comfortable running this year. And I think that has allowed for some openness within the offense to really allow those receivers to work, to allow the run game to open up as well, because now they're having to scheme up against, hey, this guy can take off 15 times and get 150 yards on 15 touches. And also, not only can he do that, but he can throw it deep to Ryan Williams, and he can make one cut move and score a touchdown. And so I've been really impressed with the offense. I personally, I'm a big Milroe guy. I love Jalen Milroe. He has struggled at times, especially with the changing of looks. But to me, I think some of that is just growing together, knowing your offensive guys, knowing your unit, recognizing the check downs a little quicker at times. But overall, I'm impressed with Milroe. I really like Milroe. I've got a bet on Milroe going first round. So I am high on
Both,
Milroe.
actually.
Hey, brother, shout out to our YouTube comment. We love Jalen Milroe, okay? We might point out some flaws, but we love Jalen Milroe, okay? And so I've been really impressed with him specifically, especially going up against Wisconsin. You're going up against a team. You really are like kind of blind versus blind because you really aren't playing them. You don't really know what their styles are. I know, Wisconsin is a smash mouth kind of let's run the ball and see what happens, but the defense has been so good, it really didn't allow them to really open up their offense because yes, they broke off some runs, but the defense was in the backfield. So offensively, really excited about it. One person I would say I'm super impressed with. It's got to be Ryan Williams. The man is 17
What a
years
hot
old.
take.
Hey, I'm not a big fan of the fingernails, but brother, if you're scoring touchdowns, you do whatever you want, bro. Okay. And so I really like him. He is a beast. He's electric. He shows the cut. It's just so quick on a catch. He's just so fluid. It's like he's just like a giraffe, like running like a giraffe. It's just so calm. He's just that guy. I don't know if there is a wide receiver in college football right now that you could say he isn't better than. There's a guy in Arizona who's pretty good. Hey, no, I know it's hot, but let's be real. This man is supposed to be a senior in high school, and he is delivering. We're not talking about like for the Troy Trojans who are losing 0-3. All right, we're talking about like a top team in the nation, and he is straight up beating guys. Like he's just not waltzing around. Like the man is a beast. Super impressed. He has opened up the run game. Shout out Jam. Shout out Justice. I am so excited for this next week, and I'll wait and hold my prediction until we get further along. But that's what I'm thinking right now. As far as the offense, super excited. Love to see it schemed up. Love seeing Milroe take off and be comfortable with it and extend drives like he did against Wisconsin. But Hampton, go ahead. I know you're going to tell me there's another wide receiver who's better than Ryan Williams, but that's my hot take, and I'm sticking to it.
That is scorching hot, brother. Hey, that's why we have you in the cafe. If you can't handle the heat, get out the kitchen.
Get out.
But my heavens, that is a hot take. So let me retort a little bit on that.
Okay.
I love Ryan Williams. I will say this. I would phrase it this way. I don't think there has been a more impressive performance at wide receiver when you factor in his age and when you factor in all of those factors than Ryan Williams. But I cannot say that he is better than Travis Hunter right now. I cannot say that he's better than McMillan from Arizona, who in the first game had 10 catches for 304 yards.
Yeah.
He had more in that game than Ryan has had all season, which is insane.
It is insane, but it's just one game.
Yeah, but he's put up numbers in other games too.
All right, I'll give you that one. I'll give
has 500 yards right now.
If we take into account the factors, we'll say I'm right. If we don't, we say you're right.
We're taking the factors. I commend you for going out on a limb and saying it, but I cannot commit all the way there. But
that's fair.
I will say on Ryan, I don't want to belabor the point because we have talked about him on this show quite a bit. But I looked at his stats before we got on. He's got 10 catches for 285 yards and 4 touchdowns. He's averaging 28 and a half yards per catch. That is insane.
Talk about explosive.
Insane. That is explosive. Like, he is on track to have 1,200 yards on like 40 catches, which is stupid.
Wild.
Just stupid. Like, that is Jalen Waddle in 2020 type levels of explosive. And I think at one point Waddle was averaging like 40 yards a catch or something stupid like that. But I think Ryan is the best receiver Alabama has had on their roster. since Jamison Williams in 2021. I think he's that good, and I think him and Bernard have been a good duo so far. And I think you would agree with, well, I know you would agree with me because you just said Ryan Williams is the best receiver in college football. He's receiver one for this team. He's the go-to guy, and he is Mr. Explosive. I mean, almost every play, every time he touches the ball, magic happens. Shout out Drew DeArmond for the nickname of Magic for Ryan Williams. But I've been really impressed with him. Looked at, before the show, I was looking, Jam and Justice both are averaging almost 9 yards per carry. They've both been very, very explosive. I said on the last show, and I stand by it, I think Justice has been a little bit of a disappointment, just a little bit, because I feel like Jam has made more out of nothing than Justice has as far as breaking tackles and being a little more explosive, other than that one run where Justice didn't get touched against Western Kentucky. But I think Jam has run really well. He's been very decisive, and he showed off that burst that he has that I think is really a really special kind of first step acceleration that he has at his disposal. I think the biggest story from the Wisconsin game, and I know we touched on it on our last show, is the offensive line kind of coming together.
Mm-hmm.
Caden Proctor coming back in the lineup, Elijah Pritchett going in at right tackle for Wilkin Formby. I think all four of those guys played an outstanding game. I thought Brailsford and Booker in particular were just straight nasty, especially in pass protection. Anytime one of them had a guy occupied, the other one would come in, clean up, and get seconds. Pancake guys, finish with physicality. They play with tenacity, everything that you love to see from an offensive lineman, good leverage, good movement. I was really, really impressed with them. And I think I've kind of come to the conclusion that this offense is going to be a running team. It's going to be an offense predicated on running the ball and taking shots down the field, which is really what they were last year in a lot of ways. And I think that's still why you're going to see at times Alabama's offense is going to be a little bit clunky. They're going to be inefficient sometimes. They're going to have some 3-and-outs. And when they score, they're going to score in a hurry, and it's going to be a haymaker knockout blow. It's going to be explosive plays down the field. My big question is what happens, and we can kind of segue now into a Georgia conversation a little bit. Georgia has not allowed an offensive touchdown this year. They got a good defense. Kirby always has that unit right. But what happens when a team like Georgia faces a team like Alabama and they take away the explosive plays? Which, again, easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
But in games last year, Alabama's offense was explosive last year. But in the game against Texas and a game against Georgia and a game against Michigan, the explosive plays kind of went away. And Alabama's effectiveness on offense decreased rapidly as well. So what is Alabama's counter when that happens? Because like any good pitcher, if you got a 100-mile-per-hour fastball, that's good the majority of the time. But you got to have a slider. You got to have a curveball. You got to have another pitch, another tool in your tool chest to kind of throw at defenses that they have to respect too. So, Shep, I'll kind of ask that question to you. What do you think happens when a team like Georgia takes that away? Where does Alabama go from there?
Yeah, I think if that happens, I think you will see Alabama lean more on kind of an RPO style game plan in terms of more short-based kind of, hey, let's get somebody in space and see if they can kind of open up the field, but also allow Milroe to kind of get out of the pocket and kind of move the offense in such a way that tries to displace the defense, if that makes sense.
Getting them from side to side? Is that what you're saying?
Say what?
Getting them to move from side to side? Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, trying to take them out of their traditional, hey, when the ball's snapped, I know this is where I'm going to be. Move them out side to side, kind of get them moving. Because when you get people moving, odds are someone's going to mess up. It's just reality. It's life. Somebody is going to mess up. And so I personally, I think that personal hot take here. I'm picking Alabama by 10. I'm giving them 10 points. Okay, because
Okay.
I've watched a Georgia team who has struggled in the first half against Clemson, who was just slow and steady wins the race. Who let's be real, Clemson's defense was pretty good in the first half. Second half, the Georgia made adjustments, looked totally different. They played a Kentucky team this week, and I am not a big believer in Kentucky. Their offense looked horrible.
No, it is.
Their defense was I would say pretty decent, pretty good. But I personally think Alabama is obviously the best offense they'll face all year, and they're going to have the best defense that they've faced all year. This scheme that Womack runs isn't necessarily something that Kirby has game planned in the past for an Alabama type offense. I mean, a lot of what Kirby has been able to benefit on at Georgia playing Alabama is he came from Nick Saban. He knows how he thinks. He knows how he operates. You're quite literally getting the first taste of quote unquote blood here from Georgia on a team that you've never really played what they're about to do in terms of what they are in terms of a full team. And so for me, I am very excited for this game. I think that Alabama's defense is really going to cause some big disruptions. I mean, Carson Beck, he threw for like 160 yards this past week. Like there's no chance he throws for 160 yards and they beat Alabama this next week. I mean, he is going to have to their offense is going to have to play better, and I'm just really excited. I think that Milroe is going to move around more in the pocket. In years past when he's played Georgia, you didn't really see that as much. I think it's going to open up some throwing lanes. I think it's going to open up the run game, and I'm just really excited to see exactly who Alabama is. I think there will be some struggles. I think there'll be a couple of drives, like you say, where they'll lean on the run a little too heavy, and it'll get them backed up in the chains. But I'm really excited to see them in what I think is going to be a big win, 10-point win for the Tide against Georgia.
So can I ask you a question before I kind of give my feedback and breakdown on the game? Are you not concerned even a little bit about in every game, especially the past two, there have been receivers that have been running open down the field that have gone past Alabama's DBs for one reason or the other, whether it be eyes in the wrong place, whether that be a coaching error, trying to sub guy in, sub a guy out, having a problem there, or just straight getting beat. Are you not worried a little bit that Carson, if that happens this next weekend, that Carson Beck is going to be better prepared and better suited to exploit that than the three quarterbacks Alabama has played up to this point?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that is a cause for some concern. But I still think Georgia's your typical, like, hey, we want to run the ball. We're going to run the ball until we can't run the ball. And so I know that they have more kind of drag routes, crossers. I really think that there will be a couple shots taken downfield, that there might be a guy running wild and free. And I'm just saying, it might happen. It might be a shootout, but I'm taking the Tide by 10.
Well, I think Georgia is going to come in, and they're going to try to establish the run, of course. But as I mentioned on previous pods, I think they're really going to lean on Carson Beck. They did last year. They were not a running team last year. They were very much a pass it down the field team, very efficient passing game. But granted, it's different this year. You don't have Brock Bowers and you don't have Ladd McConkey.
Right.
And they really haven't had anybody step up and fill the void of those two players. So I'm interested to see if they introduce any wrinkles in this bye week and going into this game, maybe to scheme some guys open a little bit more and take advantage of Alabama's inexperience in the secondary. I'm going to be looking for that. I'm also going to be looking for, as we talked about earlier with Alabama's defense, you've had a little trouble stopping the run.
Yep.
Okay? If Georgia can have success running the ball on Alabama, that is not good for the Tide. It's going to – because that opens up everything else for their offense like you talked about. That opens up the play-action game, taking shots downfield, and you become even more susceptible to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested to see that. All right? Then on offense, well, before I get to that, let me just say, I also mentioned on our last pod, I don't put a ton of stock into the Kentucky game just because Georgia has done this in the past. Last year, they go to Auburn and they look terrible on the road to a bad Auburn team. Let's just call it like it is. I'm not hating. I'm just being honest. They went 6-6 last year. They were not a good football team, and they only won by one score. They were down for the majority of that game. 2022, they went to Mizzou, struggled in that game. And then this Kentucky game. And I think a theme is Georgia on the road a little bit. Carson Beck struggles a tad. So in this hostile environment in Bryant-Denny, I'm interested to see if he rises to the occasion or he kind of gets rattled a little bit, because I think that's kind of been apparent in a few road games that they've had last year and then the one this year. Even though I will give him credit, in that Auburn game, I feel like he stepped up in that second half. That was kind of a growing up moment for him as he kind of led them down the field in back-to-back scoring drives to ultimately win the game. But again, it helps when you have Brock Bowers you're throwing to, and they don't have that this year at their disposal. On offense for Alabama, I think you made some good points. I think a lot of motion is going to be involved in this offense, which kind of goes to your point about displacing the defense, having them move from side to side, kind of that eye candy, Gus Malzahn type stuff that he employed and was successful with for so many years. But I think Alabama has even more layers to that motion. I think motion is always good to have in your offense, and I think I saw where Alabama's motioning on 41% of their plays. And again, that kind of gets defenses to tip their hand a little bit to show if they're in man or if they're in zone. It gets you favorable matchups, like maybe a linebacker has to go out wide on a running back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's an exploitable matchup that can lead to a big play for you on offense. So I do expect them to do that. But conversely, I expect Georgia to have a radically different game plan than they had last year versus Alabama, because they kind of came out and they said, we're not going to let Jalen Milroe hurt us with his legs. We're just not going to do it. So for the majority of the game, they spied two guys. I have never seen that before in a football game, where you have a QB spy with two linebackers on the quarterback to make sure that he does not run. I've never seen it. As a result, Alabama had a lot of passes underneath that were wide open the whole game, because when you have two guys spying, that's two guys not rushing the passer, and that's two guys not in coverage. And I feel like Milroe last year did not take advantage of that as much. This year, I don't think they're going to do that, because ultimately it ended up burning them on the final two drives of the game, especially the drive before the final drive, because Alabama just kind of hit him underneath, and then ultimately scored a touchdown. I think what they're going to do is similar to what South Florida did and what Michigan did. They're going to try to heat Jalen Milroe up. They're going to try to blitz him and really get him to kind of speed up his processing and speed up his decision-making. And it'll be interesting to see with the offense, as it is right now, with the offensive line fully healthy, if they're better at picking up the blitz, if there's better solutions that the coaches give him with hot reads, with checkdowns, for him to get the ball out quickly. It'll be interesting to see kind of how he responds to that. And I think, to me, that was the biggest takeaway in the Wisconsin game. Like, I went back and rewatched the game. They only rushed more than 4 guys one time in that game. And that one time was only 5 guys and led to a touchdown, where South Florida was sending 6 at a time and from all over the field at multiple points during the game the week prior. And Alabama struggled with that. So I don't know how Wisconsin watched that film and didn't employ a similar strategy against Alabama this past weekend, but it worked out for the Tide, and the offensive line held up really well when there were only 4 guys rushing, and they didn't have dynamic rushers. I think the wrinkle that Alabama introduced, and I'm sure there will be a few throughout the game against Georgia, but the one that they really introduced this past weekend that I think that's going to be a big benefit to them is the incorporation of tempo. You saw Alabama go hurry up a lot in the Wisconsin game, and I think it kind of helped Milroe settle into the game, feel a little more comfortable, got into a little bit of a rhythm, and went out there and was a little more instinctual in how he played, both throwing the ball but also rushing it. So I think against Georgia, you don't want to do it all the time, because if you do it all the time and you go 3 and out, then your defense is going to get worn out by the end of the game. So you got to pick your spots. But I think that's an interesting wrinkle that Alabama can employ in this game, along with the pin and pull run blocking system that Alabama has. That is advantageous against the 2-gap scheme that Kirby runs, because the big guys for Georgia, that does not suit their strength, kind of going side to side. They want to, again, they're part of the 2-gap. Stick, occupy 2 gaps, let the linebackers make plays. If you get them running horizontally, that's advantage Alabama. So I think there are a lot of matchups that are really interesting to watch in this game. I think it's going to be a great chess match on both sides. I bet both teams are going to have wrinkles that they have added throughout the bye week. But what I'm most interested in seeing is if Georgia takes away Alabama's rushing attack and forces them to beat them through the air, what answers does the coaching staff have, and how does Jalen Milroe respond to that? Especially if his deep ball's on, we're going to be good. We're going to be or Alabama's going to be good. They're going to be rolling. But I think there's going to be a need to have that quick passing game like you talked about. They really haven't had many traditional RPOs that we're accustomed to seeing. Maybe they break that out against Georgia. Time to pick the game. I want to pick Georgia, but they are not healthy right now, and I don't know how healthy they're going to be going into this game. They are missing some key pieces. Tate Rowledge is probably not going to play in this game. He had surgery for a high ankle sprain, and even if he comes back, he's not going to be 100%. Michael Williams, same thing. There are a few other players along that team that are key contributors that are going to be banged up going in this game. So give me Alabama eking it out against Georgia, and the first big statement win for Kalen DeBoer and the Tide in the 2024 season. Shep, I know I went on for a minute. You got anything to add to that?
Man, you're not going to give us a game score?
A game score?
Yeah, let's see.
Let's go 31-27. 31. Let's go 31-27 Alabama.
Okay. All right. I like it. I think mine's a little closer in terms of Alabama putting a few more points up. So I'm going to say give me like 38-27. 38-27 the Tide. I think that Alabama has a few more explosive athletes on the offensive side of the ball, and I think that's going to be the game changer this week.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if you look at just playmakers on offense for both teams, Alabama has a significant advantage in that department.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think you could say that maybe the past 2 years, but you definitely can this year. So going to be interesting to watch it play out. And Shep, I just want to thank you again, man, for joining me, for breaking down Alabama to this point in the season and this Alabama-Georgia game that is going to be coming up this Saturday. I cannot wait for it like you. It's going to be the premier matchup of the season so far. And it's kind of what we love college football for. Two marquee programs battling it out under the lights, prime time. Can't wait to watch. And more importantly, can't wait to break it down here on the Pigskin Cafe. Another reminder before we head out, if you haven't already, if you made it this far, go ahead, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, leave us a like, leave us a comment, because we love hearing from you. Follow us on social media, and we'll be back, hopefully, on Wednesday. The plan is for me to shoot a reaction video late on Saturday night and have it ready to go for you guys on Wednesday, because due to scheduling conflicts, we will not be able to record on Sunday. So we're going to kind of shift it up a little bit and have a solo reaction pod going out on Wednesday. So stay tuned for that. But the Pigskin Cafe is going to be closed for now. But until Wednesday, chew on that. We'll see you soon.